Kneel. The word cut through the great hall like a blade through silk. Kira's breath caught, not from surprise, but from the cold formality in King Matthias's voice. She had heard him speak 1,000 times, had memorized every inflection, every subtle shift in tone that signaled danger or approval. But this voice, this commander's bark delivered before the entire royal court, was one she had never heard directed at her. Not like this, not when she still bore the bruises from throwing herself. Between him and an assassin's poisoned blade just hours before. The left side of her ribs screamed in protest as she lowered herself to one knee, her leather armor creaking softly in the suddenly silent hall. 200 pairs of eyes watched her descend. 200 witnesses to what she had believed would be her moment of recognition, the culmination of 5 years spent as the king's shadow, his silent protector. The blade he never had to see but always knew was there. The marble floor was cold even through her reinforced knee guard. Kira kept her eyes down, fixed on the intricate pattern of gold and white stone that formed the royal seal beneath her. She had walked across the seal 1,000 times, had stood guard beside it while Matthias held court, had even bled on it once when training had gotten too enthusiastic. But she had never knelt on it. Guardians did not kneel. They stood vigilant, ever watchful, a living shield between their charge and death. Yet here she was, summoned before the assembled nobility of the 4 kingdoms, told to kneel like a supplicant or a servant. Her wolf stirred uneasily deep within her, a presence so long suppressed it felt more like a ghost than a living creature. Kira had learned young to cage that part of herself. Emotion was weakness. Attachment was vulnerability. A guardian who felt too much was a guardian who hesitated, and hesitation meant death. So she had buried her wolf beneath layers of discipline and duty, had transformed herself into the perfect weapon, unfeeling, unflinching, utterly loyal. 5 years ago, Matthias began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vaulted hall. I inherited a kingdom on the brink of civil war. The southern pacts challenged my right to rule. The eastern clans refused to bend the knee. Assassins came in the night. Poison arrived in my food. Blades found their way into my chambers. He paused, and Kira could feel his gaze on the top of her bowed head, like a physical weight. In those 5 years, this woman has saved my life 17 times. 17 times she has stood between me and death. 17 times she has asked for nothing in return except the honor of continuing to serve. The hall remained silent. Kira's hands, resting on her bent knee, trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the effort of holding herself perfectly still, while her body reminded her that she had cracked at least 2 ribs deflecting that assassin's strike. The court physician had wanted to dose her with healing herbs and force her to bed rest. She had refused. The king had summoned her, and a guardian answered when called, broken bones or not. Tonight, Matthias continued, we gather not only to honor such extraordinary service, but to announce a new chapter for our kingdom. A chapter of alliance, of strength, of unity that will finally bring peace to our lands. Something in his tone made Kira's wolf growl, a low, warning rumble that only she could hear. Her fingers curled slightly against her thigh. Lady Seraphina of the Northern Highlands, if you would join me. The rustle of expensive fabric whispered through the hall. Kira did not look up, but she did not need to. She knew Seraphina's scent, could identify the deliberate click of her heeled boots against marble, could picture exactly the expression of serene triumph that would be gracing the lady's flawless face. Seraphina was everything Kira was not. Beautiful where Kira was scarred. Refined where Kira was rough. An alpha of pure bloodline where Kira was a nobody, pulled from the training yards because she could take a beating and keep standing. Seraphina had been circling Matthias for months, appearing at court functions, offering her father's military support, making it abundantly clear that an alliance between their houses would benefit everyone. Everyone except the invisible guardian, who watched it all unfold from her post by the door. "Serafina and I," Matthias announced, and Kira's world began to tilt on its axis, "are to be married. The Northern Highlands and the Crown will unite, bringing 40,000 warriors under one banner and finally securing our borders against those who would see this kingdom fall." The applause was immediate and thunderous. Kira heard it as if from underwater, a distant roaring that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Her vision narrowed to the golden lines of the royal seal beneath her, the way the torchlight made them seem to writhe and shift like living things. Married. The word echoed in her skull. Matthias was getting married, to Serafina, to the woman who had never once acknowledged Kira's existence except to look through her as if she were furniture. The woman who would become queen. The woman who would stand beside the king. Kira had devoted her entire adult life to protecting. "Rise, guardian Kira." Matthias's voice pulled her back from the edge of whatever dark place her mind had started to spiral toward. Kira stood, and the movement sent white-hot pain lancing through her left side. She did not flinch, did not gasp, did not show even the slightest flicker of discomfort. A guardian did not show weakness. She lifted her eyes for the first time since kneeling. And finally, she met Matthias's gaze. The impact stole what little breath she had left. His eyes, that distinctive amber gold that marked him as descended from the first kings, widened almost imperceptibly. A muscle in his jaw tightened. For one impossible moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Kira felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked away so long she had forgotten it existed. Heat flooded through her veins. Her wolf, that caged and sleeping creature, suddenly threw itself against the bars of its prison with a force that made her stagger half a step backward. And in that instant, in that single moment of eye contact that should have meant nothing, Kira knew. She knew, with a certainty that defied logic or reason. Matthias was hers, her mate, her other half. The bond that every wolf dreamed of finding snapped into place with such intensity that she could taste it, a golden thread connecting her soul to his. But Matthias looked away. He turned to Serafina, took her hand, raised it to his lips in a gesture that sent murmurs of approval rippling through the crowd. And Kira understood that whatever he had felt or not felt in that moment, it did not matter. It would never matter, because he had already made his choice, and that choice was not her. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. Kira stood at attention while Matthias presented Serafina with the crown's promise, a ring that had been worn by every queen in the kingdom's history. She remained motionless while the court celebrated, while wine flowed and music played and the nobility congratulated themselves on securing such a beneficial alliance. She did not move when Serafina finally deigned to look at her, those ice-blue eyes sweeping over Kira with the same interest one might show a coat rack. And when Matthias dismissed the court, when the hall finally began to empty and servants appeared to clear away the celebration, Kira simply turned and walked toward the door. "Guardian." His voice stopped her 3 steps from escape. Kira did not turn around. "You are injured. The physician said your ribs require treatment and rest. You are dismissed from duty for the next week while you heal." It should have sounded like concern. It should have sounded like gratitude or care, or even basic human decency. But all Kira heard was dismissal. All she heard was that he needed her functional, not that he cared if she hurt. "As you command, Your Majesty." Her voice came out steady, professional, utterly empty of the screaming chaos that raged inside her. She walked out of the great hall with her spine straight and her head high, and she did not look back. Not once. Not even when she felt his eyes burning into her back like brands. The Guardian's quarters were small but comfortable, a far cry from the luxury enjoyed by the nobility, but better than the barracks where she had spent her youth. Kira made it through the door, made it all the way to the center of the room, before her knees gave out and she collapsed. The pain from her ribs was nothing compared to the agony tearing through her chest. The mate bond, now that she had felt it, would not be silenced. It pulled at her, demanded she return to him, insisted that she fight for what was hers by the laws of nature and destiny. But Kira had spent 5 years learning to ignore what she wanted. 5 years burying every inappropriate thought. Every moment her heart had stuttered when Matthias smiled. Every time she had wanted to reach out and touch him only to curl her fingers into fists instead. She could survive this. She would survive this. She had survived everything else life had thrown at her. Orphaned at 6. Recruited into the Guardian program at 7. Trained until she bled, and then trained through the bleeding until she stopped feeling it. Made into a weapon because weapons did not need families or love or anything except a hand to wield them. A scream built in her throat. Kira clamped her jaw shut and swallowed it down, swallowed down the rage and grief and bone-deep loneliness that threatened to unmake her. Her wolf howled inside her skull, a sound of such anguish that Kira folded forward and pressed her forehead against the cold floor. She did not cry. Guardians did not cry. Instead, she lay there in the darkness of her small room and felt something inside her break so completely that she knew it would never be whole again. When dawn came, Kira was gone. She left her Guardian's insignia on the bed. She left her ceremonial weapons mounted on the wall. She left behind 5 years of service and sacrifice and silent suffering. The only things she took were her training leathers, a hunting knife, and a small pack of supplies. No note, no explanation. She simply walked out of the castle before sunrise, nodded to the gate guards who had long since stopped questioning her comings and goings, and disappeared into the forest that bordered the capital. The wild lands stretched for hundreds of miles beyond the kingdom's borders, a vast, untamed wilderness, where the old magic still ran strong and the ancient ways still held sway. It was dangerous territory, home to rogue wolves and wild beasts, and things that had no name. It was exactly where Kira needed to be. She walked for 3 days straight, pushing herself until exhaustion made her stumble, until her ribs screamed and her muscles trembled, and her mind finally, blessedly, went quiet. On the 4th day, she reached a place deep enough that she could no longer sense the castle, no longer feel the pull of the mate bond with quite so much intensity. She made camp beside a stream, started a fire, and allowed herself to simply exist. No duty, no responsibility, no king to protect. For the first time in 5 years, Kira belonged only to herself. The realization should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt like being untethered, drifting in an endless void with nothing to hold on to. She sat by the fire until it burned low, then lay down on the hard ground and stared up at the stars. Tomorrow she would figure out what came next. Tonight, she would just survive the pain of this moment. Back at the castle, Matthias stood in his private chambers and stared at the Guardian's insignia that had been delivered to him an hour after dawn. The wolf's head emblem seemed to mock him, its silver surface reflecting the early morning light. She was gone. His guardian, his shadow, his constant presence for 5 years, had simply vanished. The captain of the guard had reported her departure, noted that she had taken nothing of value, left no indication of where she might be going, just walked away as silently as she had always done everything else. Matthias turned the insignia over in his hands. The metal was warm from being carried against someone's chest, probably the guard captain's. But before that, it had rested over Kira's heart. He closed his fist around it and felt something twist painfully in his chest. "You are distracted." Seraphina's voice came from the doorway. She entered without waiting for permission, her silk morning robe whispering against the floor. The wedding preparations require your input on several matters. The council wishes to discuss the ceremony date, and your former guardian's abandonment of her post is causing talk among the staff. She said former guardian with the same tone someone might use for spoiled meat. Something dark flickered through Matthias. Kira did not abandon her post. She resigned her position, which is her. Right after 5 years of exemplary service. She left without permission or notice. Serafina settled gracefully into a chair near the window, arranging her robe to best display her figure. That is abandonment. She should be hunted down and brought back to face consequences. The words were barely out of Serafina's mouth before Matthias was across the room, his hand slamming against the wall beside her head, hard enough to crack the plaster. Serafina flinched, genuine fear flashing in her eyes for the first time since he had known her. "You will not speak of her that way." His voice came out as a growl, his wolf surging so close to the surface that his eyes blazed gold. Kira has earned the right to go where she pleases, do as she pleases, live as she pleases. She has given more to this kingdom than you can possibly comprehend. She is not to be hunted. She is not to be pursued. She is to be left alone. Is that understood? Serafina's throat worked as she swallowed. She nodded. Once, sharp and quick. Matthias pulled back, suddenly aware of how close he had come to losing control. He returned to the window, putting distance between himself and his future queen. "Forgive me. That was inappropriate. You care for her?" Serafina's voice was carefully neutral. "The guardian. You care for her more than is proper for a king to care for a servant." Matthias did not answer. He stared out at the forest beyond the castle walls and wondered where Kira was right now. If she was safe. If she was in pain. If she hated him for what he had done. That moment in the great hall haunted him. When she had finally looked up, when their eyes had met, something had punched through him with the force of a physical blow. For 5 years he had been blind. For 5 years he had seen Kira as nothing more than a tool, a weapon, a useful asset to be deployed as needed. He had never once looked at her as a woman, never once considered that beneath the armor and discipline might exist a person with thoughts and feelings and needs of her own. And in that single moment of connection, when the bond had roared to life between them with such intensity that it had stolen his breath, he had finally seen her. Really seen her. And then he had turned away. Because what else could he do? He was a king. Kings did not get to follow their hearts. Kings did not get to choose love over duty. He had obligations, responsibilities, an entire kingdom depending on the decisions he made. The alliance with Serafina's family would bring peace, would save countless lives, would secure the throne for generations to come. One person's happiness, even if that person was his true mate, could not be weighed against the good of thousands. But knowing that did not make the hollow ache in his chest any easier to bear. "The council meeting is in an hour," Serafina said quietly. "You should prepare." She left without another word. Matthias remained at the window long after she had gone. The guardian's insignia still clutched in his fist, and tried not to think about what he had lost. In the wildlands, Kira's wolf finally woke. It happened on the 7th night, as she sat by her fire and watched the flames dance. One moment she was alone in her own head, and the next, a presence unfurled inside her with such power that she gasped aloud. This was not the weak, caged creature she had known all her life. This was something ancient and wild and utterly untamed. Her vision sharpened, until she could count the individual scales on a moth's wings 10 feet away. Her hearing expanded until she could track the heartbeat of a rabbit hidden in the underbrush. And when she breathed in, she smelled everything. The rich loam of the earth, the mineral tang of the stream, the complex scent signature of every living thing within 100 yards. But beneath it all, woven through it all, was something else. Magic. old magic that hummed in her bones and sang in her blood. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Kira stood on trembling legs. Her wolf pushed at her, demanding release, demanding to run and hunt and be free after so many years of imprisonment. She stripped off her leather armor with shaking hands, stumbled away from her camp until she reached a clearing bathed in moonlight. Then she let go. The shift was supposed to hurt. Every wolf she had ever known described it as bones breaking and reforming, as agony so intense it took years to learn to push through it. But when Kira shifted for the first time in her life, there was no pain. There was only rightness. Her wolf was enormous, far larger than any she had seen except for alphas of pure bloodline. Her fur was the color of moonlight and shadows, silver and black in equal measure. And when she threw her head back and howled, the sound echoed through the wildlands with a resonance that made the trees tremble. Every wolf within 5 miles heard that howl. Every creature, with even a drop of magical blood, felt the power behind it. And deep in a cave system that had been sealed for 1,000 years, something ancient stirred in response. Kira ran. She ran until her muscles burned and her lungs ached, and the mate bond's insistent pull faded to background noise. She ran until she could think of nothing except the feel of earth beneath her paws and wind in her fur. She ran until she was no longer a discarded guardian or an invisible woman or a broken toy cast aside. She was simply herself, wild, free, alive. When she finally returned to her camp as dawn painted the sky pink and gold, Kira felt different. Not healed, not whole, but changed in some fundamental way. Her wolf settled contentedly inside her, no longer caged but choosing to rest. And for the first time since that horrible moment in the Great Hall, Kira smiled. She was not done yet, not by a long shot. But whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. No more living in shadows. No more making herself small and silent and convenient. If Matthias wanted a ghost, he could find one elsewhere. Kira was done being invisible. 3 weeks passed. Matthias threw himself into wedding preparations and council meetings, and every possible distraction from the growing wrongness that gnawed at him day and night. The mate bond, once awakened, could not be silenced. It whispered to him constantly, a pull in his chest that pointed north toward the wildlands, toward Kira. He found himself standing at windows, staring into the forest. Found himself distracted during meetings, his mind wandering to memories of the way she moved, the rare times she had smiled, the absolute certainty in her eyes when she had stepped between him and danger. Serafina noticed. How could she not? She was intelligent and observant, and increasingly frustrated by his inattention. Their engagement was supposed to be a celebration, a joyous occasion. Instead, it felt like a funeral march. You need to decide, Serafina said one evening, as they sat through yet another strained dinner. You need to decide if you are going to be present in this marriage, or if I am going to spend my life competing with a ghost. Matthias set down his wineglass. I am doing my duty. Duty? Serafina laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what we are calling it? You are haunted, Matthias. Every time you look at me, I can see you wishing I was someone else, someone who threw herself in front of blades. For you, someone who never asked for anything in return. She stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I deserve better than this. I deserve a husband who actually wants to marry me, not one who is settling because it is politically convenient. She left before he could respond. Matthias sat alone in the dining hall and acknowledged the bitter truth. Serafina was right. She deserved better. She deserved someone who could give her their whole heart, not someone who had unknowingly handed that heart to a woman in leather armor, and then lost her before ever realizing what she meant. The problem was that duty and desire were at war inside him, and he did not know which side would win, or which side he even wanted to win. In the wildlands, Kira discovered she was not alone. The old woman appeared at her camp on the 21st day, emerging from the forest as if she had always been there. She was ancient, her face lined with a century of living, her eyes the silver of old. Moonlight. "You carry the bloodline of the first mothers," the woman said without preamble. "I felt your awakening, felt the old magic stir for the first time in generations." Kira's hand went to her knife. "Who are you?" "I am called Morgana. I am keeper of the old ways, guardian of histories your people have forgotten." She settled by Kira's fire uninvited. "And you, child, are more than you know. More than they allowed you to become." Over the next hours, Morgana told Kira truths that reshaped everything she understood about herself. The Guardian program had not chosen her at random. They had chosen her specifically because the court mages had sensed her potential and wanted it contained, controlled, aimed like a weapon, but never allowed to fully bloom. She was descended from the first mothers, the original female alphas who had ruled before the kingdoms united under male kings. Her bloodline carried magic that made her not just a warrior, but a force of nature. And her wolf, suppressed for so long, was not weak. It was sleeping, waiting for the moment when Kira was ready to claim her full power. "Why tell me this now?" Kira asked. "Why not years ago when I could have done something with this knowledge?" Morgana's smile was sad. "Because years ago, you would not have listened. You were too busy trying to be what they wanted you to be. Too busy serving a man who could not see your worth. Sometimes we must lose everything before we are ready to claim what is truly ours." She reached into her robes and withdrew a silver pendant, a wolf's head with sapphire eyes that seemed to glow in the firelight. "This belonged to your ancestor, the last of the first mothers to rule. She was betrayed by those she trusted, her power sealed away, her bloodline scattered and suppressed. But she left a legacy. She left instructions for the daughter who would one day wake and remember what was stolen." Kira took the pendant with trembling hands. The moment her fingers closed, around it, power surged through her, a rush of images and knowledge and ancestral memory that made her gasp. She saw the first mothers in their glory, saw their civilization built on balance between masculine and feminine power, saw the coup that toppled them, the deliberate campaign to erase them from history, to make it seem as though male alphas had always ruled alone. And she saw her own face, repeated through generations, the bloodline carefully preserved even as it was hidden and diminished. "What am I supposed to do with this?" Kira whispered. Morgana stood, preparing to leave as mysteriously as she had arrived. "That, child, is for you to decide. You can hide here in the wildlands and live out your days in peace. Or you can return to the world and remind them that queens are not made by marriage. They are born in blood and magic, and the courage to stand when everyone else kneels." She disappeared into the forest, leaving Kira alone with a pendant that pulsed with ancient power and a choice that would define the rest of her life. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Kira did not make her decision immediately. She spent another week in the wildlands, learning to work with her wolf, exploring the magic that now flowed through her veins as naturally as blood. She discovered she could heal faster than any normal wolf, could sense emotions in others like they were physical things, could communicate with animals that normally fled from predators. She was not just a guardian anymore. She was not just a discarded mate. She was something the world had tried very hard to make her forget she could be. She was powerful. And power, Kira was learning, changed everything. Back at the castle, everything was falling apart. The wedding was 3 days away. Serafina had moved into the queen's chambers and was systematically redecorating to suit her tastes. The nobility had arrived from across the 4 kingdoms for the celebration. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned, except Matthias could barely function. The mate bond had gone from a whisper to a scream, His wolf was in constant turmoil, raging against the cage of duty and obligation. He snapped at advisors. He paced his chambers like a caged animal. He stood at his window every night and stared north until his eyes burned. This cannot continue. His beta, Marcus, cornered him in his study on the eve of the wedding rehearsal. You are coming apart at the seams, and everyone can see it. You need to either find her and claim her, or you need to sever the bond and commit to Seraphina. But this half-existence is destroying you. I cannot sever a mate bond, Matthias said quietly. And I cannot abandon my kingdom for personal desire. So what exactly would you have me do, Marcus? His oldest friend and most trusted advisor looked at him with something close to pity. I would have you be honest. With yourself, with Seraphina, with everyone. This marriage is a mistake. A politically convenient mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. And you know it. Before Matthias could respond, horns blared from the outer walls. The alarm call. The one that signaled an approaching threat. Both men were moving before conscious thought kicked in, racing through corridors and downstairs until they burst onto the ramparts. What they saw stopped Matthias in his tracks. A single figure walked toward the castle gates. A woman in leather. Armor that seemed to shimmer with silver light. Her hair, which Matthias remembered as plain brown, now held threads of white and silver that caught the late afternoon sun. She walked with the confidence of a queen approaching her throne, and every step seemed to make the very air around her vibrate with power. Kira had come home. But the woman approaching the gates was not the same broken guardian who had fled 3 weeks ago. This was someone new. Someone who had found herself in the wilderness and emerged transformed. The gates opened without anyone giving the order. The guards simply stood aside as Kira walked through, her eyes fixed on the castle entrance where Matthias stood frozen on the ramparts. She did not hurry, did not run. Simply walked with absolute certainty toward a confrontation that was 5 years overdue. Matthias met her in the courtyard. He descended from the ramparts, pushed through the gathering crowd of curious nobles and servants, and came to a stop, 5 feet from the woman who haunted his every waking moment. They stared at each other in silence. Kira spoke first. I have returned to claim what is mine by right of blood, and magic, and destiny. I have returned to remind you of what you tried to throw away. I have returned because I am done being invisible, done being convenient, done being the weapon you only acknowledged when you needed someone to bleed for you. Her voice carried across the courtyard, rich with power that made every wolf present feel the weight of her bloodline. I am Kira, last daughter of the first mothers, bearer of the bloodline of queens, and you, Matthias, king of the 4 kingdoms, are my mate, whether you claim me or not. The courtyard exploded into chaos. Nobles shouted questions. Guards moved forward and then stopped, unsure who they were supposed to be protecting. And from the castle entrance, Seraphina appeared, her face a mask of cold fury. How dare you? Seraphina hissed, descending the steps with a murder in her eyes. How dare you come here on the eve of the king's wedding and make such absurd claims? You are nothing. A guardian. A servant. You have no bloodline, no power, no right to anything, least of all him. Kira turned to face her, and something in her expression made Seraphina falter mid-step. I am everything you pretend to be. I am the real thing, while you are merely playing at power in borrowed clothes. She raised her hand, and the pendant around her neck blazed with blue fire. But I did not come here to fight you, Seraphina. I came here to offer my king a choice. She turned back to Matthias, and the mate bond between them roared to life with such intensity that he staggered. You can marry her. You can have your political alliance and your convenient peace. You can spend your life with someone appropriate and bloodlined and absolutely safe. Or you can choose me. Choose the bond that was written in our souls before we were born. Choose the wild magic and the dangerous path and a future that is anything but certain. But you cannot have both. You cannot have duty and destiny. Not this time. Matthias felt like he was being torn in two. Everything he had been taught, everything he believed about what it meant to be king, demanded he choose Serafina, choose stability, choose the kingdom's needs over his own. But his wolf was howling, throwing itself against every restraint he had ever built. And looking at Kira now, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time, Matthias realized something that should have been obvious years ago. She was not just his mate. She was his equal, his match. The other half of a whole that had been sundered when he had been too blind to recognize what stood right in front of him. I was wrong. The words came out hoarse, barely audible. Matthias cleared his throat and spoke louder. I was wrong to dismiss you, wrong to use you, wrong to take everything you gave and offer nothing in return, wrong to turn away when the bond awakened because I was too much a coward to choose what my heart demanded. He took a step toward her. Kira remained perfectly still, but he saw the way her breath caught, the way her eyes widened slightly. You deserved better than I gave you. You deserved to be seen and acknowledged and cherished. You deserved a king who was worthy of the guardian who gave him everything. Another step. And I do not know if I can be that king. I do not know if I can balance duty to my people with the demands of this bond. But I know that trying to live without you these past weeks has been the worst torture I have ever endured. One more step. Close enough now that he could reach out and touch her if he dared. So, I choose you, Kira. I choose the wild magic and the dangerous path, and whatever future we can build together. I choose my mate over my duty, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to prove that I am worthy of the choice you made to come back. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Serafina laughed, a bitter sound that cut through the tension like a knife. You fool. You absolute fool. You would throw away an alliance that took months to negotiate, that brings 40,000 warriors to your banner, that secures your throne. For what? A mate bond with a woman of no consequence? Your kingdom will fall. Your enemies will descend like wolves on wounded prey. And it will be your fault. Matthias did not take his eyes off Kira. Then let it fall. Let them come. Because I have learned something these past weeks. A kingdom built on denying fundamental truths, on suppressing what makes us most alive, on sacrificing the bonds that matter most for political convenience, is not a kingdom worth ruling. I was a fool, Serafina, but not for the reason you think. I was a fool for not seeing the woman in front of me for 5 years. I will not make that mistake again. He extended his hand to Kira. She looked at it for a long moment, and Matthias saw the war in her eyes, saw her own doubts and fears, and the very real possibility that she might turn away, that she might decide he was not worth the risk, that he had proven himself too unreliable, too blind, too willing to choose duty over love. But then Kira smiled. It was small and tentative, and absolutely breathtaking. She placed her hand in his, and the moment their skin made contact, power exploded outward in a visible wave that sent everyone in the courtyard stumbling backward. The mate bond, finally acknowledged and accepted by both sides, sealed itself with a force that shook the very foundations of the castle. When the light faded, Matthias and Kira stood together, their hands clasped, their wolves singing in harmony for the first time. And around Kira's head, visible to everyone present, a crown of silver light had formed. The mark of the first mothers, the sign of a queen born not through marriage, but through blood and magic and destiny. Serafina stared at them with undisguised hatred for one long moment, then turned and stalked back into the castle. The alliance was broken. The carefully laid plans were destroyed, and Matthias could not bring himself to care even a little bit. You are going to cause so many problems, Kira said quietly, her voice pitched for his ears alone. Political nightmares, Military complications, probably a civil war or two. Matthias grinned, feeling lighter than he had in months. Then I suppose it is fortunate that I have a queen who knows how to fight. He pulled her close, propriety be damned, and kissed her in front of the entire assembled court. Kira melted into him, and the rightness of it, the perfection of finally claiming what should have been his from the start, nearly drove him to his knees. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the courtyard erupted in applause. Not from everyone. Not from the northern nobles who had come expecting a wedding between their lady and the king, but from the common guards, from the servants, from the wolves who understood what a true mate bond meant, and who had watched their king waste away these past weeks. The next days were chaos. Seraphina's father withdrew his warriors and his support. 3 minor lords declared they would not recognize a queen of no official bloodline, mate bond or not. The council held emergency session after emergency session, trying to determine how to handle the political fallout. But Matthias weathered it all with Kira at his side, and slowly, something remarkable began to happen. The story of the guardian who saved the king 17 times and asked for nothing in return spread like wildfire. The truth of Kira's bloodline, once Morgana came forward to bear witness and produce ancient texts proving the existence and power of the first mothers, captured the imagination of wolves across the kingdom. And when Kira stood before the council and demonstrated her abilities, when she showed them magic that had not been seen in generations, even the most skeptical lords had to acknowledge that she was no mere guardian. She was queen by right of power as much as by right of the mate bond. Not everyone accepted it gracefully, but enough did. Enough that Matthias could hold his kingdom together while building something new, something better. A rule based not just on masculine strength, but on balance, on partnership, on the recognition that power came in many forms, and the strongest kingdoms were those that honored all of them. The claiming ceremony took place 1 month after Kira's return. It was nothing like the grand wedding that had been planned for Seraphina. Instead, it was held in a sacred grove in the wildlands, witnessed by Morgana and Marcus, and a handful of wolves who had proven their loyalty beyond doubt. Kira wore silver leather, etched with the symbols of the first mothers. Matthias wore simple black, no crown, no royal regalia, just a man claiming his mate under the moon. When they sealed the bond, when Matthias bit into the junction of Kira's neck and shoulder and felt her do the same to him, power surged through them both. The trees around them blazed with silver light. The earth trembled, and every wolf within 100 miles felt the strength of what they had become together. "I will spend the rest of my life making up for the 5 years I wasted," Matthias whispered against Kira's skin as the ceremony ended, and they were finally alone. Kira laughed, the sound free and joyous. "You will spend the rest of your life beside me as an equal partner, nothing more and nothing less. The past is done. I am more interested in the future we are going to build." She kissed him then, deep and claiming and full of promise. "Besides, you are going to be far too busy dealing with the fact that I have opinions about kingdom management, and I am no longer going to stay silent about them." Matthias groaned, but he was smiling. "I am going to regret this, am I not?" "Probably," Kira agreed cheerfully. "But you are going to be far too happy to care." She was right. Matthias did have regrets. He regretted every moment he had wasted not seeing Kira for who she was. He regretted the pain he had caused her. He regretted almost throwing away the most precious gift he had ever been given. But he did not regret his choice. Did not regret breaking his engagement to Seraphina. Did not regret the political complications, or the military tensions, or the endless council meetings required to rebuild alliances in new ways. Because every morning he woke with his mate beside him. Every day he ruled with a partner who challenged him and supported him in equal measure. And every night he fell asleep with the absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? Kira had been invisible for so long that becoming visible felt like learning to breathe all over again. But she adapted, because that was what she had always done. She took her place beside Matthias, not as a decoration or a trophy, but as a true partner in rule. She reopened texts about the first mothers and began teaching young female wolves that they could be more than mates and mothers. They could be warriors and leaders and forces of nature in their own right. Not everyone approved. There were assassination attempts, political machinations, whisper campaigns intended to undermine her. But Kira had spent 5 years learning to be a weapon. Now she turned those skills toward protecting not just one king, but an entire vision of what their kingdom could become. And Matthias, who had once been blind, now saw everything. He saw when she was tired and needed rest, saw when she was frustrated with council politics and needed to escape to the training yards, saw when the weight of her new responsibilities grew too heavy, and she needed him to simply hold her and remind her she was not alone. They fought sometimes, argued about policy and strategy and the right way to handle threats both internal and external. But they fought as equals, and they always came back together, the mate bond ensuring that anger never lasted long, and love always won in the end. 5 years after Kira's return, she stood in the great hall where she had once knelt in humiliation, and watched as young guardians took their oaths, male and female both, trained not just to be weapons but to be protectors who understood their own worth. She wore the crown of the first mothers openly now, silver and sapphire and wickedly sharp. And when the ceremony ended and the new guardians filed out, Matthias came to stand beside her. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Coming back, choosing this life instead of the freedom you found in the wildlands?" Kira considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity, the quiet, the ability to just be without everyone watching and judging and demanding." She turned to face him fully. "But then I remember that I did not come back for comfort or peace. I came back to change things, to matter, to ensure that no other young wolf grows up having to choose between power and visibility. And I remember that I get to do this work with my mate beside me." She smiled. "So no, I do not regret it, not even a little bit." Matthias pulled her close, no longer caring if anyone saw their king embracing his queen in the middle of the great hall. "Good, because I have another 40 or 50 years of making up for lost time planned, and it would be terribly inconvenient if you decided to run off to the wildlands again." Kira laughed and let herself lean into his strength. "Then I suppose I am staying. But only because you are moderately tolerable company." "Moderately tolerable," Matthias repeated, mock-wounded. "After everything I have done?" "After everything," Kira agreed, then kissed him before he could protest further. And in tea. That moment, in that hall where she had once knelt broken and dismissed, Kira felt the rightness of her choice settle into her bones. She had been invisible for so long, but now she was seen. Now she was known. Now she was exactly where she belonged. The balance had shifted, and the entire kingdom was better for it.